The ER at St. Jude's is always loud, always messy, and always moving. But tonight everything is about to stop. See that man in the shadows by the private hallway? The one in the expensive suit with eyes as cold as ice. He didn't come here for a checkup. He's already decided how this night ends. But before we get to that, we have to look at the moment that started a war. Kendra is the kind of nurse who keeps the whole hospital running. Even after 10 hours on her feet, she's still focused, her stethoscope around her neck and her natural hair a bit messy from the long shift. She's just trying to do her job. She doesn't hear the footsteps behind her. Then there's Dr. Williams. He's the star surgeon, the guy who thinks the hospital rules don't apply to him. He doesn't ask for things, he takes them. In a split second, the room shifts. Williams loses his temper and lunges, pinning Kendra against the hard hospital wall. The sound of her back hitting the wall echoes like a gunshot. Kendra's hands fly up to protect herself, her eyes wide with shock. She's a professional, but right now she's being treated like she's nothing. The whole room goes quiet. The beeping monitors sound like they're screaming for help. Williams leans in close, his face twisted with anger. He thinks he's the most powerful person in the room. He thinks no one would dare challenge him. But he's wrong. He hasn't noticed Don Alessandro Moretti watching from behind the glass. Alessandro doesn't move a muscle, but his look says it all. Dr. Williams just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he has no idea what's coming for him. By the time Kendra's shift ended, her shoulders were so tight they felt like stone. She sat in her car, her hands still shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She could still feel the phantom pressure of Dr. Williams' fingers digging into her skin, pinning her against that cold, hard wall. She just needed to go home, sleep, and pretend it was all a bad dream. But when she walked into work the next afternoon, the air felt different. Usually, the other nurses greeted her with a smile or a quick update on a patient. Today they looked away. Some whispered as she passed. The heavy feeling in her gut told her something was very wrong. "Kendra, my office. Now," a sharp voice called out. It was Mrs. Gable, the head of nursing. She looked like she hadn't slept, and she wouldn't meet Kendra's eyes. Kendra walked in, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sitting on the desk was a thick blue folder. On the very top was a formal incident report with Dr. Williams' signature scrawled across the bottom in bold, confident ink. "What is this?" Kendra asked, her voice small. "It's a serious complaint, Kendra," Gable sighed, finally looking up. "Dr. Williams filed a report regarding the incident in the trauma bay last night. He says you had an emotional breakdown. He claims you were hysterical and putting a patient's life at risk because you couldn't stay calm under pressure." Kendra felt the blood drain from her face. "Hysterical? He pushed me. He pinned me against the wall." Gable held up a hand to stop her. "That's not what he says. He says he had to physically restrain you to keep you from interfering with a critical procedure. He says he was protecting the patient from you." Kendra gasped, the injustice of it stinging like a slap. She looked down at the paper. The words jumped out at her. Unstable, aggressive, safety risk. He was turning the truth upside down. He wasn't the attacker anymore. In this version of the story, he was the hero who saved the day from a crazy nurse. "This is a lie," Kendra whispered, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "There were people there. They saw him." "Nobody is coming forward, Kendra," Gable said softly. "And without proof, it's your word against the hospital's top surgeon. The board is already talking about a permanent mark on your license. Until this is sorted, you're on unpaid administrative leave." Kendra felt like the floor had opened up beneath her. This was the paperwork trap. He wasn't just trying to bully her. He was trying to delete her career. As she walked out of the hospital, clutching her bag to her chest, she felt smaller than she ever had in her life. She reached her car and leaned against it, defeated. The god of the ER had won. Or so she thought. A black car with tinted windows sat idling just a few yards away. Inside, a man watched her through the dark glass. He saw her tears, and he saw the folder in her hand. Alessandro Moretti didn't need to read the report to know exactly what kind of lies were inside. He picked up his phone, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Get the footage," he ordered. "All of it. Before they realize it's already gone." Alessandro Moretti didn't belong in a place that smelled of bleach and desperation. He was a man of cold marble offices and whispered orders that moved millions of dollars across the globe. But tonight, he sat in the plastic chair of the waiting room, looking like a predator in a cage. He wasn't there for a checkup or a broken bone. He was there because one of his best men, a soldier named Marco who had taken a bullet meant for Alessandro, was currently fighting for his life behind the double doors of the surgery wing. 4 hours, Alessandro had been a silent statue. He watched the chaos of the ER like a hawk, but his focus had shifted the moment he saw Kendra. He had watched her for half the night. While other doctors barked orders and younger nurses panicked, Kendra was the anchor. She moved with a quiet power, her hands steady as she bandaged wounds and her voice calm as she soothed terrified children. To Alessandro, she looked like she belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She was a queen in blue scrubs, a woman who did the hardest job in the city and asked for nothing in return. Then he had seen the god of the hospital, Dr. Williams, try to break her. Alessandro had witnessed many acts of violence in his life, but there was something about the way Williams pinned her to the wall that made his blood turn to ice. It wasn't just a physical attack. It was an attempt to steal her dignity. He saw the way Kendra's shoulders shook after the doctor left, not with fear, but with the weight of a woman who had been forced to be strong for too long. "Don Alessandro," a low voice interrupted his thoughts. It was his driver, standing a respectful distance away. "The surgery is over. Marco is stable. We should leave before the morning shift arrives. It's not safe for you to stay here this long." Alessandro didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the empty hallway where Kendra had stood just moments before. He thought about the folder he knew was being typed up at that very moment, the lies that would try to bury her. In his world, if you didn't fight back, you disappeared. But Kendra didn't have a family business or a private army to protect her. She only had her truth, and in a place like St. Jude's, the truth was easily erased. "Safety is a choice, Roberto," Alessandro said. His voice a low rumble that sounded like grinding stones. "And I've decided that this hospital isn't as safe as it thinks it is." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He had come to the ER to honor a fallen soldier, but he was leaving with a new mission. He wasn't a good man. He knew that better than anyone, but he hated a bully even more than he hated the law. As he walked toward the exit, he glanced at the security office. He knew the hospital would try to lose the footage of what Williams had done. They thought they were the only ones with power. They were wrong. "Find out where she lives," Alessandro commanded as he stepped into the cool night air. "And get me the name of the man in charge of the security tapes. I want to have a very long conversation with him." The walk to the parking garage felt like a mile. Kendra clutched her cardboard box of personal belongings, a spare pair of scrubs, her favorite mug, and her stethoscope, as if it were the only thing keeping her from floating away. The unpaid leave notice felt heavy in her pocket, a piece of paper that basically said she wasn't wanted. The garage was dimly lit and smelled like exhaust and cold concrete. It was usually a place where she felt a sense of relief, the transition from being Nurse Kendra to just Kendra. But today it felt like a tomb. She reached her car and tried to slide her key into the lock, but her hands were shaking so hard the metal just scraped against the door. "Come on," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Just get in the car. Just get home." She finally got the door open and collapsed into the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there in the dark, staring at the steering wheel. For years, she had worked twice as hard as everyone else. She had stayed late, skipped lunches, and held the hands of dying patients when their own families couldn't make it. She had built a life on being reliable. And in less than 60 seconds, Dr. Williams had turned all that hard work into a safety risk. The silence of the garage was overwhelming. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the look of pure, unchecked power in the doctor's eyes. He knew he could do it. He knew the hospital would choose a star surgeon over a nurse every single time. A hot tear tracked down her cheek, followed by another. She wasn't just sad, she was terrified. How was she going to pay her rent? How would she explain to her mother that she was banned from the hospital because a man pushed her and then lied about it? The injustice felt like a physical weight on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her hair was a mess from the scuffle, and her eyes were red. She looked like the unstable person Williams described in his report. That was the worst part. He was making her feel like the lie was true. Suddenly, a soft thud on her window made her jump. She gasped, looking toward the glass. A man was standing there. He wasn't a doctor, and he didn't look like he belonged in a hospital parking garage. He was tall, dressed in a suit that cost more than her car, and his face was calm, almost peaceful. Kendra didn't roll down the window. She was too tired to be scared, but she stayed alert. The man didn't try to open the door. Instead, he simply tucked a small, cream-colored envelope under her windshield wiper. He looked directly into her eyes through the glass, gave a tiny, respectful nod, and walked away into the shadows without saying a word. Kendra waited until his footsteps faded before she dared to reach out and grab the paper. Her heart hammered in her throat. Who was he? And how did he know exactly which car was hers? She unfolded the note. Inside there was no name. Just 5 words written in elegant, bold ink. The cameras never truly sleep. Kendra stared at the note as the engine finally turned over. A spark of something she hadn't felt all day, hope, flickered in her chest. But as she drove out of the garage, she couldn't help but wonder. If this man was helping her, what did he want in return? Kendra spent the next 3 days in a fog. Her apartment, usually her sanctuary, felt like a cage. Every time her phone buzzed with a news alert or a text from a coworker asking what happened, her stomach did a somersault. She felt like she was watching her life dissolve through a blurry window. On the 4th morning, just as she was staring at a bowl of cereal she couldn't bring herself to eat, her phone rang. It wasn't a contact she recognized. The caller ID simply read, "Private number." Usually she'd let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing felt deliberate. She swiped to answer, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello, Kendra," a voice replied. It wasn't a question. It was a low, smooth baritone that sounded like expensive velvet and cold steel. It was the kind of voice that commanded a room without even trying. Kendra's breath hitched. She remembered the man in the parking garage. The man in the suit. "Who is this?" "A witness," the man said. "My name is Alessandro Moretti. We haven't officially met, but I was in the trauma bay the night Dr. Williams decided the rules didn't apply to him." Kendra sat up straight, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You saw it. You saw him push me." "I saw everything," Alessandro said, and Kendra could almost hear the grim smile in his voice. "I also know about the report he filed. I know he called you hysterical. I know the hospital is planning to turn his lie into your reality." "How do you know all that?" Kendra asked, a flicker of fear crossing her mind. "Who are you really?" "That doesn't matter right now," Alessandro replied calmly. "What matters is that the hospital, accidentally, deleted the security footage from that hallway this morning. They think they've cleared the path for Williams to keep his throne." Kendra felt the last bit of hope drain out of her. "Then it's over. If the footage is gone, it's just my word against his. He wins." "He would," Alessandro said, his tone turning dangerously sharp, "if he were the only one who knew how to handle data. But I have a private security team that doesn't answer to hospital boards. I have something that belongs to you, Kendra. I have the truth. 47 seconds of it, in high definition." Kendra's hand shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. "You have the video." "I do." And I have the best legal mind in the state waiting for my signal. But there is a catch. Kendra closed her eyes. She knew it. Men like this didn't do favors for free. What do you want from me? I want you to stop hiding, Alessandro said, his voice dropping to a protective growl. I'm going to send a car for you in 1 hour. If you get in, we start a war. If you don't, you can take a settlement and walk away. The choice is yours, Kendra. Do you want to be a victim? Or do you want to be the reason he never wears a white coat again? The line went dead before she could answer. Kendra looked at her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone. For the first time in days, her eyes didn't look red from crying. They looked bright with a cold, rising fire. She looked at the clock. 59 minutes left. Exactly 1 hour later, a sleek black sedan pulled up to Kendra's curb. The driver didn't honk. He simply stood by the door waiting. Kendra took a deep breath, smoothed down her best blazer and stepped inside. The interior smelled like expensive leather and silence. As they drove toward the city's glittering skyline, Kendra realized they weren't going to a police station or a humble legal aid office. They were heading toward the tallest glass tower in the financial district. The elevator opened directly into a private suite that looked more like a museum than a law office. Huge windows showed the entire city stretching out below, making everything and everyone look tiny. Ms. Kendra. Thank you for coming, a woman said, stepping forward. She was dressed in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. Her hair was pulled back in a tight silver-streaked bun, and she carried a tablet like a weapon. I'm Sophia Vane. Mr. Moretti has asked me to handle your case. Kendra blinked. She knew that name. Sophia Vane was the lawyer who defended billionaires and cleared the names of people the news called untouchable. 1 hour of her time probably cost more than Kendra made in a year. Is Mr. Moretti here? Kendra asked, glancing around the empty, polished room. Alessandro is a busy man, but he is watching closely, Sophia replied, tapping her screen. A monitor on the wall flickered to life. He wanted me to show you this before we sign any papers. Kendra gasped. It was the footage. In crystal clear high definition, she saw herself at the nurse's station. She saw Dr. Williams walk up. His face twisted in that familiar, ugly sneer. She watched him grab her, saw her own body jerk back against the wall, and watched her stethoscope swing wildly as she struggled. Most importantly, the camera caught his lips moving, clearly saying things that were definitely not about patient safety. He looks like a monster, Kendra whispered, her hand moving to her throat. He is a bully who thinks he's a king, Sophia said firmly. But look at the corner of the screen. Kendra looked. There, through the glass of the trauma bay, was the silhouette of Alessandro Moretti. He was standing perfectly still, watching the assault like a judge. Seeing him there made Kendra feel a strange shiver. It wasn't just fear. It was the realization that she had stepped out of her quiet, hard-working life and into a world of shadows and power. Mr. Moretti doesn't just want to win a lawsuit, Kendra, Sophia said, leaning in. He wants to dismantle Dr. Williams. He wants to show the hospital board that they picked the wrong side. But you need to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. Williams will try to dig up every mistake you've ever made. He'll try to ruin you. Kendra looked at the image of the man in the suit, the man who had seen her at her lowest and decided to help. She didn't know Alessandro's true motives, and she didn't know if she could trust a man who lived in the dark. But she looked at the video of herself being pushed, and the fire in her chest burned hotter. I'm not afraid of the truth, Kendra said, her voice finally steady. What do I sign? Sophia smiled, but it wasn't a warm look. It was the look of a shark that had just found its dinner. Good. Let's go to work. As Kendra signed the thick stack of papers, she felt the weight of the Moretti empire settling around her like a suit of armor. She was safe for now, but she couldn't help but wonder, what happens when the war is over, and the man in the suit comes to collect his fee? The air in the hospital boardroom was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and desperation. Kendra sat at the long mahogany table, feeling small in the oversized leather chair. Across from her sat the hospital's top lawyers and the chief of staff, all wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, not a person who had been hurt. "Kendra, we've reviewed your history with us," the chief of staff said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "You've been an exemplary nurse. We'd hate for one messy misunderstanding to ruin your future. We're prepared to offer you a very generous settlement. 2 years' salary, paid in full, starting today." Kendra looked at the envelope. It was enough money to pay off her student loans and help her mom retire. It was the easy way out. "And what do I have to do for this?" Kendra asked, her voice steady. "Just a simple signature on a non-disclosure agreement," the lead lawyer chirped, tapping a fountain pen on a stack of papers. "You agree that nothing happened, the report against you vanishes, and we all move on. You can even keep your job after a short vacation to let things blow over." They were asking her to sell her truth. They wanted her to pretend Dr. Williams hadn't pinned her to that wall, and in exchange, they'd give her a pile of hush money. For a second, Kendra looked at the door. She thought about her empty bank account and the unstable label hanging over her head. It would be so simple to just sign and walk away. "She's not signing." The voice came from the corner of the room. Kendra hadn't even noticed Alessandro standing there in the shadows near the windows. He stepped forward, his dark suit catching the light. He didn't raise his voice, but the entire room seemed to turn cold. The hospital lawyers shifted uncomfortably, their confident smiles flickering like dying light bulbs. "Mr. Moretti," the chief of staff stammered. "This is a private administrative matter." "It became my matter the second your star surgeon laid hands on her," Alessandro said, walking over to stand behind Kendra's chair. He placed a hand lightly on the back of the seat. He didn't touch her, but his presence felt like a shield. "You aren't offering her a settlement. You're offering her a bribe to protect a predator." "We are trying to protect the reputation of St. Jude's," the lawyer snapped. Kendra looked at the envelope again, then looked up at Alessandro. He wasn't looking at the lawyers. He was looking down at her. His eyes weren't cold anymore, they were encouraging. He was giving her the one thing the hospital wouldn't: a choice. Kendra pushed the envelope back across the table. "My reputation is the only one that matters to me," she said, her voice growing stronger with every word. "Dr. Williams attacked me. You lied about it. No amount of money is going to make me say otherwise." The chief of staff's face turned bright red. "You're making a huge mistake, Kendra. If you walk out that door, we will fight you with everything we have." "Good," Alessandro rumbled, a dangerous glint in his eyes as he leaned over the table. "Because I've been looking for a reason to see what everything looks like." He turned to Kendra and offered his arm. As they walked out of the boardroom together, Kendra felt a rush of adrenaline. She had officially declared war on the most powerful people in the city. She was no longer just a nurse in a hallway. She was a woman with an army behind her. But as the elevator doors closed, she realized the hospital wasn't her only problem. Dr. Williams was losing his mind, and a man like him wouldn't go down without trying to take her with him. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, turning the city sky into a bruise of purple and orange. Kendra stood by the fountain in the center of the park, pulling her sweater tight against the morning chill. The world was quiet, except for the distant sound of a street sweeper and the occasional chirp of a bird. She felt exposed out here in the open, away from the hospital walls and her apartment's locks. A shadow lengthened across the pavement. She didn't have to turn around to know it was him. Alessandro Moretti moved with a silence that shouldn't belong to a man of his size. He stopped a few feet away, looking out at the waking city. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket today, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing a glimpse of dark ink on his forearms. "You're early," he said. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to ground her. "I couldn't sleep," Kendra admitted, finally turning to face him. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that boardroom. I see the look on the chief's face. Why are you doing this, Alessandro? Really? She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. You're a man who deals in favors and power. You have lawyers who cost thousands of dollars an hour. You don't even know me. People like you don't just help people like me out of the goodness of their hearts. So what's the catch? What do you want? Alessandro was silent for a long moment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver coin, flipping it over his knuckles. When I was in that trauma bay, I was waiting for news on a man who has been like a brother to me for 20 years. I was prepared to lose him. I was ready for the world to go dark. He stopped flipping the coin and looked directly at her. For the first time, Kendra didn't see the boss or the protector. She saw a man who was deeply, quietly tired. Then I saw you, he continued. I saw Dr. Williams put his hands on you. I saw the shock in your eyes, but more than that, I saw the way you stood your ground afterward. You didn't break. You went right back to work because people were counting on you. You have a light in you, Kendra. It's the kind of light that guys like Williams try to blow out just because they can. He took a step toward her, his expression turning intense. I'm helping you because I saw your face in that moment, and I decided I wasn't going to let him win. In my world, I don't leave things unfinished. Williams is a loose thread. I intend to pull it until he unravels. But why me? She whispered. Because you're the first thing I've seen in a long time that was worth saving, he said softly. Before Kendra could process the weight of his words, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face turned back into a mask of stone. It's starting. Williams just found out we've blocked his attempt to transfer his medical license to another state. He's cornered. What does a cornered man do? Kendra asked, a chill running down her spine. He bites, Alessandro replied. Stay close to Sofia today. And Kendra, don't answer your door for anyone but me. As he walked away, leaving her alone in the rising light, Kendra realized the war wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about something much deeper. But as she watched him disappear into the shadows, she wondered, if Williams was the monster she knew, was Alessandro the monster she didn't? The conference room felt like a courtroom, but the judges were just men in expensive suits trying to save their own skin. Kendra sat at the table, her back straighter than it had ever been. Across from her, Dr. Williams looked smug. He was leaning back, checking his watch as if this whole thing was a waste of his important time. He actually had the nerve to wink at the chief of staff, confident that his star power would protect him. Sophia Vane didn't waste time with small talk. She stood up and placed a small black flash drive on the table. Gentlemen, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. We've heard your version of the story. We've read the reports claiming Ms. Kendra was hysterical. Now let's look at what actually happened. The lights dimmed, and the large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. It wasn't the blurry, grainy footage the hospital had recovered earlier. This was high-definition multi-angle video. The room went dead silent as the image of Williams appeared. They saw him corner Kendra. They saw the jagged, aggressive way he shoved her against the wall. But the real grenade was the audio. Alessandro's team had enhanced the sound from a nearby desk mic. Know your place, Kendra, Williams' voice hissed from the speakers loud and clear. You're a set of hands, nothing more. If I say you messed up, you messed up. No one is going to believe a nurse over me. The video looped, showing the impact again. Kendra felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't look away. She watched as the faces of the board members turned from bored to horrified. The chief of staff looked like he was about to be sick. Dr. Williams bolted upright, his face turning a ghostly shade of white. That's doctored. This is a setup, he shouted, his voice cracking. The god of the ER was finally stumbling. It's not a setup, doctor. It's a mirror, a voice rumbled from the back of the room. Alessandro Moretti stepped out of the shadows. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which was somehow scarier. And while you were busy lying about this, My team was looking into your other misunderstandings. We found 3 other nurses you paid off to stay quiet over the last 5 years. Their statements are already at the district attorney's office." The silence that followed was heavy. Williams looked around the room, searching for a friend, but everyone was looking at the floor. He had become a liability. "Dr. Williams," the chief of staff said, his voice trembling, "you are suspended immediately, pending a full criminal investigation. Security will escort you out." 2 burly security guards, who used to take orders from Williams, stepped forward. They didn't be polite. They grabbed his arms and marched him toward the door. As he passed Kendra, he looked at her with pure hatred, but the power was gone. He just looked like a small, angry man in a white coat that didn't fit anymore. Kendra let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a week. It was over. The lie was dead. But as the board members scrambled to apologize to her, she looked at Alessandro. He wasn't celebrating. He was already walking toward the exit, his work done. She realized then that the hospital was safe, but her life was changed forever. The truth had set her free, but it had also pulled her into a world where the rules were written by the man in the dark suit. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. The hospital was behind her, but the feeling of the wind was still buzzing in Kendra's veins. That evening, she didn't go back to her apartment to hide. Instead, she found herself on the rooftop terrace of a quiet, private restaurant that overlooked the entire city. The lights below looked like spilled diamonds, and the air was finally clear. Alessandro was already there, standing by the stone railing. He had traded his tie for an open collar, looking less like a boss and more like a man who was finally letting his guard down. A small table was set for 2, but there were no waiters, no noise, and no distractions. "You look different," Alessandro said as she approached. "The weight is gone." "I feel lighter," Kendra admitted, stepping up beside him. "For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Williams is gone. The truth is out. I have my life back." She paused, looking at the sprawling view. "I haven't said it yet. Thank you, Alessandro. You didn't have to do any of it." Alessandro turned to her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. "I told you before, I don't leave things unfinished. But this wasn't just a favor, Kendra. Helping you. It reminded me of what it feels like to actually be on the right side of a fight." They sat down to a meal that was simple but perfect. The conversation didn't revolve around court dates or security footage anymore. They talked about where they grew up, the things that made them laugh, and the dreams they had before the world got complicated. Kendra realized that beneath the expensive suits and the dangerous reputation, Alessandro was a man who had been lonely for a long time. As the night grew colder, Alessandro reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "The hospital board wants to offer you a leadership position. They're terrified of you now, which means you have the power to change that place. And my world. Well, it's always looking for someone with a moral compass." Kendra looked at his hand, then back up at the city. She knew that stepping into Alessandro's life was a risk. He was a man of shadows, and she was a woman of the light. But she also knew she didn't want to go back to being the girl who just swallowed the humiliation. "You've spent a lot of money and time protecting me," Kendra said softly, her voice steady. "I have," he whispered. Kendra smiled, a spark of the new her shining through. She didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't grab his either. "Not yet." "Then don't stop now. If you want to be part of my life, Alessandro, you have to do more than just save me from a bully." He tilted his head, intrigued. "And what do I have to do?" Kendra stood up, looking out over the city they both now influenced in their own ways. "Earn it," she said with a wink. Alessandro laughed, a warm, real sound that shook his chest. He stood up next to her, and for a long moment, they just watched the city breathe. The war was over, but the real story was just beginning. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe for more interesting video.